reconciliation, peace and justice. The church is in Africa at the service of reconciliation, peace and justice. At the service of reconciliation, peace and justice.
The media plays a significant role in shaping human cognition, in controlling the way sense experiences are interpreted by human beings to make meaning, and it also directs the way that human beings remember things. The media, or media as it's usually called, refers to all forms, all shapes, all ways by which information is conveyed to the human brain. And then the media, the specific means of communication through which information is conveyed to the audience or the public. The human brain is capable of receiving 11 million bits of information per second, at every second. But out of these 11 million bits of information, the human brain can consciously process 50 to 120 bits of this information. When we take the range of 50 to 120, it will now depend on the capacity of the human brain to process. There are some people who process 50 and they reach a point where people are unable to even process 50. That means they are below the normal human reasoning capacity. From 50 to 120, people fall between different range of processing information. This is the business of the human brain and information. Today, we shall be discussing how the human mind and the media interplay in the processing of information. Hi there, good people, and welcome to our program, The Church on Social Communications. The program that guides us on the use of the means of communication according to the mind of Christ, the perfect communicator, as taught by the church and directed by professionals in the field of communication. Accept warm greetings from the foot of Mount Fako, where DMR TV is reaching you on television, on radio, through its social media platforms. My name is Sinfred Sinyom Senetata, your host for the program, The Church on Social Communications. Our discussion today is the interplay between the human mind and the media. It's an aspect of media literacy. We allow you to take your position and get ready for us to start the discussion. I'll be back in a jiffy. Thank you and welcome.
In Africa, at the service of reconciliation, peace and justice. At the service of reconciliation, peace and justice.
If you are just joining us, the program is The Church on Social Communications, and today our discussion is on the human mind and the media. And of course, we send you greetings, Jubilee greetings, 75th anniversary greetings from the Diocese of Buea, as we are preparing and gathering momentum and steam to a peak celebration of the Diocese of Buea, 75 years, on Wednesday at Divine Mercy Co-Cathedral, where the celebration, we will culminate this celebration that started a year long. And we send greetings and congratulations to the Bishop of Buea, the Most Reverend Michael Bibi, who is the Chief Shepherd, the man in charge of directing and coordinating at the top this celebration, which has gone for a year long. And greetings to all listeners of the program, The Church on social communications. Our discussion, the human mind and the media. For every conscious reaction and response your brain gives to a media text, to any information, the same brain is also subconsciously or unconsciously reacting and responding to other things automatically. That means the brain is always functioning in an automated way and in a present context of consciousness. That means the conscious and the subconscious brain are always functioning together to process information in ways that we do not know. The brain does these automatic acts to reduce what is called cognitive load, or the amount of time taken to complete a task. Because if the brain does not have this background operation in the subconscious which has been programmed, it will be very, very difficult to process information and for us to do many things. These automations are a kind of shortcuts that the brain uses to arrive at meanings or to make sense from different stimuli that come to the brain through the senses, the sense of sight, smell, touch, feeling, and of course, information. Bits of information, as we know, are hitting the brain at every second. And we say 11 million bits of information hit the brain every second. But the brain can only consciously process 50 to 120 bits of this information. That means we must work to keep our brain alert so that it can actually reach the maximum and the optimum of information processing. Our brains do a lot of things automatically. They tell our lungs to breathe and tell our hearts to beat without consciousness while doing other things at the same time. Why these unconscious automatic functions are quite good to facilitate the process of cognition, there are others that are not really good when it comes to making serious meaning. Let us follow gradually. We're heading to somewhere. Most often, we are unable to identify when the brain is taking a shortcut and when the brain is not taking a shortcut. For instance, you can easily sit and describe, this is the route going to your house, and you put the picture in your mind and you have reached your home. You will realize that if you want to go in details about imagining from where you sit to reach your home, you will realize that many things the brain has filled the gaps. You have never taken cognizance of certain places. Or you may just be asked, can you describe the number of steps in the place, an office, say you have an office where you climb, you walk on steps every day and move to the office. You think that you picture yourself climbing up the steps. But when you ask, how many steps do you climb to reach this office? You realize that every day you walk on this step, but you don't know the number of steps that are there. But the brain drives you, and unconsciously it can always call you, see the step, but you cannot count them. We can remember what we did one day 12 years ago, but we may not be able to remember what we took for breakfast. It is possible. At the other time, we may remember what we took for breakfast maybe in 1980 something, 1950 something, one morning, but we will not be able to remember certain things. So the brain works in very mysterious ways. We can remember the whole gist about a film we watched some years behind, but we will not be able to remember the name maybe of the main actor, the name that was so prominent in the film, the name that was called more than many other names in that film. We are not able to remember. Why so? With all these, what the brain does so well is to complete the picture, to fill the gaps. But nonetheless, the brain does not often do it objectively. When the brain is filling the gaps, it fills the gaps and then we just have a complete picture. But when we get to the details of the picture from the brain, they are not there. We will not understand. But we quickly flashback that the brain is always filling the gaps, completing the pictures, fill the pixels that are lacking, and we have the complete picture in our minds. But when we want to analyze that picture, we realize that there are certain aspects of that picture that the brain only fills the gaps with previous images, with previous schemas. We will get to understand what the schemas are. We shall begin examining some key psychological concepts that explain how the media affects the human mind. We take a break, and then when we come back, we begin to study the cognitive load and automation of the human brain and its interplay with media.
Service of reconciliation, peace and justice. At the service of reconciliation, peace and justice.
Welcome back. The program is the Church on Social Communications, if you are just joining us. After that description, let us understand what we mean by cognitive load and automation. We are living in the world of social media. From new media, we have social media, and we are now in the world of artificial intelligence, which is a type of the new social media. Now, when we are exposed to media platforms, especially those using rapid, visually stimulating format like social media reels, Instagram, TikTok, pictures on WhatsApp, YouTube, and we are constantly on it, they can significantly increase our cognitive load. We subject our brain to so many activities. Maybe instead of the normal range of 11 million bits of information, we might be subjecting the human brain to more than that. But when we do that, we are not conscious of the fact that the force of those images we are sweeping across has a way it plays in our mind. The cognitive load becomes very heavy for the brain to manage. Cognitive load is the mental effort required to process information. And there is a range. And we gave you a range that the conscious processing of the information is between information that constitute 50 to 120 bits per second. Now, when the normal brain, in the normal functioning level, 11 billion bits of information are hitting the human brain, and when in the abnormal oppression where many of us find ourselves, you are hitting the brain with more than 11 million bits of information. You are overloading the brain, you are traumatizing the brain, you are overworking the brain, and the brain will not be capable of processing between 50 to 120 bits of information. So the human being is at a danger. The fast pace, the constant sensory inputs, the rapid transitions overload the brain, making it difficult for users to process information deeply or reflect on what they have seen. So you overwork the brain, and then the functioning of the brain becomes lower. Because when we project between 50 and 120 bits of information, we mean when the brain is receiving 11 million bits. But when we expose it maybe to 15 million bits, sometimes you can try to even check what you have swapped up on your phone. You will discover that you have pushed a lot of information. And the information don't only come from our brain, because this calculation is based on information that is conveyed not through special means of communication. Because when we read number plates, see houses, see people moving, all the means through which information enter our brain, they are the means of media. But when we now get to specialized media of communication, which could be newspapers, radio, television, and the digital platforms, which are now ubiquitous, which are everywhere now. We are in a very fast range of information overload, what is known information overload. We begin to feel what is meant by information, but unconsciously, we are not aware of this until we understand how the human brain functions. And that is why media literacy is very important for us. For example, watching a series of short, flashy reels can leave users mentally exhausted and less able to remember or interact new information. Sometimes you see people who are swapping their phones and pretending to be listening. You cannot have the same retentive capacity. And then you are overworking the brain without realizing. So these short film, flashy reels that we go through every day, we subject ourselves to every day, this can create overload. So this overload can reduce meaningful learning and lead to shorter attention spans, that we do no longer have the capacity to pay attention because the brain is weak. As the brain is constantly switching focus without time to consolidate memories or form new connections, the attention span of the brain reduces. This has been proven, tested and proven. Now, let us understand how the brain remembers past events or remember issues or build information. How the brain guides us in interpreting meaning and making meaning out of sense experiences. How the brain makes sense out of sense experiences. It uses what is called a schema. The schema. A schema is a mental framework or a cognitive structure that helps people organize and interpret information. It is in the brain, in the human brain. Now, the media plays a crucial role in shaping these schemas the way they are formed by repeatedly exposing audiences to particular narratives and stereotypes or frames, maybe gender roles, political biases, particular way of reporting news. When we receive these constantly, they build permanent kind of schemas in the human brain. Now, over time, these repeated exposures strengthen existing schemas, making individuals more likely to interpret new information in line with media influence beliefs. Why? Because it is easy to go to the old schemas and see things with that way. And that's where what we call prejudices, stereotypes, that's where they come from. And when the brain is no longer, processing at the normal speed, it is easier for us to learn into schemas, because that one will reduce the cognitive load, and we interpret things, we see things in the same way, even when there are possibilities of those things not being the way we have. We come with our prejudices, stereotypes, preconceived minds to consume media. For example, frequent exposure to news stories that frame a specific group negatively can lead individuals to develop or reinforce negative schemas about that group. We only see what we presume that is there. We are looking like this, but we see only what is there. What is not there, we are seeing what is in our mind. We transfer what is in our mind because it gives the brain less work. And since the brain has been deadened with overload, over consumption of media leads to the weakening of the brain. That's what we are seeing. We are not be able to see beyond what is, what recognizes or what reconnects to the schemas already in our brain. Now we take a break. When we come back, we look at how the schemas shape media perception and the processing. we are just tuning in, the program is the Church on Social Communication, and we are discussing the human mind and the media. Now, we're looking at how schemas shape media perception and processing. We can describe schemas as codes that the brain developed, the brain build, the structures that the brain builds in order to remember things, in order to function in the subconscious without, focusing, doing more work to process information. Now, there's what we call selective attention and interpretation, what goes on in the human brain. The schemas direct our attention to information that fit our pre-existing beliefs and expectations, because it is easier to go back to what we already know. So making use more likely to notice and remember schema's consistent details while ignoring or forgetting the schema inconsistent information. What we're saying here is that the new things are difficult to process. It is easy for the brain to switch to the already known schemas and make meaning out of it. So be very careful when people, tell you things. Subject the things to verification. For example, if someone has a schema that politicians are dishonest people, they may focus on news stories about political scandals and overlook positive reports about politicians' achievements. When they look, they see but what is already, we call it prejudices, the stereotypes. These stereotypes are built in the schemas. We have put them in our mind and we insist that that is what is there. So we have a selective attention and an interpretation which switches us easily to previous information that we know. So the brain will be very comfortable not to do more work in. And then when you get a brain that is already overloaded with information overload, with our exposure to bombardments at every second, which deadens the functioning of the brain, there's a tendency for us not to even remember, to get to old things and begin to remember. We will realize that we easily go back to the old way, as was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. We don't look to see. Now, how do the schemas help to fill the gaps? Filling in the gaps. When media messages are incomplete or ambiguous, schemas help us fill in the blanks with default value or our prior knowledge. For instance, I mentioned here that just where you are, think of the road leading from where you are to your home. You will realize that you will sit and see your home easily. This is the road going down. Let's say I'm sitting in DMR TV studio here. I want to reach Bongo Square. I just put my mind, this here, I've reached the road, go down, past a hospital junction, here I am. The brain just fill in the gaps. Those other places which I have not captured, I can't remember, they come to mind as if I'm seeing a whole lot and the road is easier to go. But there's a lot more that has been left out. That is how the brain, when the brain is already weak, it fills the gaps this way. And that is how most often we consume media, in that way, filling the gaps, attentive selection and interpretation begin to dominate. Now, how we look at memory encoding and retrieval. Information that aligns with our schemas is easier to encode. Encoding means for us to put meaning into it and retrieve from memory. We see the information, we package the past memories, which are past schemas, and go back there. So be very careful when people look at things and continue to see what is in their mind and not what is there. Because when you see something, you process it and then you make meaning. When the brain is quickly or has quickly been used to be prone to go back to the old schemas, you'll be looking something and seeing what is in your mind. Because the brain has been so overloaded with information that is unable to make meaning. Media messages that fit our mental frames are more likely to be remembered accurately, while others that contradict our schemas are often forgotten or distorted. That is why for you to bring out new information, you must make it outstanding. if you want to bring in news that will be attractive, the news is extraordinary happening things, not the ordinary things. How do you position this news, knowing that the human brain will easily go to the old ways? You must calculate how to how to package this news in such a way that what you want to convey will be able to reach the audience as desired. If not so, you end up, allowing the media, the audience to fill the gaps, because their brains are prone to automating the filling of the gaps because of information overload. Resistant to change. Schemas can make us resistant to new or conflicting information presented in the media. We have mentioned this. When confronted with messages that challenge our existing schemas, we may dismiss, reinterpret, or ignore them, leading to biased information processing and reinforcing our current beliefs. And this is caused by information overload, which I say because the brain is subjected to too much information. Sometimes when you like sweeping of the phone with someone who is consistently on the media, on social media, and you are overloading your brain, and the capacity of the brain to process information begin to drop. And once it is dropping, there's a danger. So it is not multitasking, the multitask work where we sitting with the phone and browsing and sweeping of different images. We do not know the damage that we do to our brain. But we may think that, no, I'm just looking at it. Sometimes that's why it is becoming difficult for people to even remember certain things. People forget now easily because they do not want to subject the brain to active functioning. Formation of media schemas. Over time, repeated exposure to certain types of media content can create and strengthen specific schemas about the media itself. I continue to repeat this because the force of interpretation or making meaning from media texts is based on the schemas that we form in our brains. And these schemas can become very strong that we make recourse to them anytime that we face information that's a little bit difficult. That's why in media reports, we easily call figures by rounding them off, so that when you start going 1.3568 square, some people will not go there because you're already subjecting the media, the brain to cognitive load, which the brain would not comfortably want to go there. And also the brain that is already weak because of over bombardment of media, of information bits every second, make that brain weaker. So this is to let us know that we have to be very careful the way we consume media. Practical example, suppose a person has a schema that certain social groups are frequently portrayed negatively in the news. When watching a report about a crime, they might automatically assume the perpetrator belongs to that group, even if the media does not specify this, because their schema fills in the missing information with what they already know. Remember the example I gave you, how you sit and imagine you have a mastery of this. Maybe he just asks you, how many branches do you have on the way leading to your house? Hey, you will realize that you have not taken note. But the brain will show you a complete route. So the brain also leads you to previous schemas that you have built in your mind. So conversely, if the news challenges their schema, they may question its accuracy or dismiss it as an exception. So where are you? At what level are you? So in summary, what we are saying is that schemas act as cognitive fillers, shaping how we perceive. Perceptions are sense experiences that gain meaning when we interpret them. how we interpret and remember media information, often reinforcing existing attitudes and beliefs while filtering out or distorting new or conflicting messages. What we are saying in effect is, do not subject your brain to information overload. Because when you put your brain to information overload, you are causing cognitive load. Cognitive load is the mental effort required to process information. And we will argue, even people who are already addicted to media, they will say, no, I'm not addicted. I'm not. And when we have addictions, we no longer reason very well. We are acting based on old schemas. We remain the same, even when we are seeing new things. We fail to see new things. So you must be able to rest your brain. If you do not rest your brain, you are subjecting your brain to overload, and you are making that brain, you are deadening that brain. You are weakening that brain. And the normal rate of information processing of every brain, which scientists have put at between 50 to 120 bits of information that is processed in the conscious mind, will drop. And sometimes we will drop at a below 50 level. Below 50 level, because we have overworked the brain. We have overworked the brain. So you try to think of how you remember. Ask yourself, do you keep things and recall where you have kept them easily? Are you the kind that forgets easily? Are you beginning to realize that you are forgetting? Your forgetfulness is growing. Then ask yourself, how do you consume media? Watch the way you consume media and see if you can rest those gadgets. Remember, those gadgets are meant for us to use. We should not allow them to use us. Human beings were communicating before they look for a way of amplifying the communication through these means. But we are not careful. We do not understand how these means function. They will be using us where we are claiming to be using them. And many of us are already victims of being used by the media. If you did enjoy the program, please stay tuned again next Monday at 1:30 p.m. for another edition of the program, The Church on Social Communication. We are going to continue the discussion on media literacy, and we're going to go further to take you to the next level of how the human mind and the media function. My name is Singfred Senior, wishing you the best and inviting you to come on Wednesday for us to conclude the peak celebration of the 75th anniversary of the Diocese of Buea. Lots of beautiful things are awaiting you. Come also with your support to contribute for us to complete the giant projects that are going on in the Diocese of Buea. God bless you and goodbye.
Service of reconciliation.